Now to another announcement from President Trump focused on life in the district. During a cabinet meeting today, he said the Justice Department will seek the death penalty for people charged with murder in D.C. The president made the remarks while continuing to hammer cities across the country for what he calls out-of-control crime.
Anybody murders something in the Capitol, capital punishment, capital punishment. If somebody kills somebody in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., we're going to be seeking the death penalty. And that's a very strong preventative. And everybody that's heard it agrees with it. I don't know if we're ready for it in this country, but where you have it, it is, we have no choice.
The president said this is only for murders in D.C. He said states will have to, quote, make their own decisions. Local law in the District of Columbia currently does not allow the death penalty. It was abolished by the D.C. Council in 1981 and rejected again by D.C. voters in 1992. The strongest sentence for murder in D.C. court is life without parole, but federal prosecutors can still push for capital punishment in federal cases, and the Trump administration is now pushing for more crimes in the district to be tried in federal court. While the president wants to use capital punishment as a deterrent in the district, how that would work is still an open question. Tonight, we want to look at some of those complications. We're joined now by David Mohammed. He is the executive director of the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform. Thanks for joining us tonight. As we said, many defendants in federal cases can already receive the death penalty if tried in federal court. And we know that some of the D.C. laws are subject to the whim of Congress. So how would this work if it could actually happen in D.C. to get murders tried with the death penalty?
Well, first, as you said in your setup, D.C. voters in 1992 rejected the death penalty. This is a year when D.C. had one of its highest murder rates in history. And so D.C. voters noted that it's actually not a deterrent. But two ways in D.C. One, if you're charged for a federal crime, you can receive the death penalty. I've come before you today happening to be in Indiana, where the federal government executes people on federal death sentences. Second is if Congress forces D.C. to change its law. Because D.C. does not have all the rights enjoined by a state, Congress still can impose its will on D.C. So there could be a change, although that's unlikely, seeing that won't overcome the Democrats in Congress. But if charged federally, you still could be receive the death penalty, which would not be good for the administration of justice in the District of Columbia.
So let's talk about practicality and cost. There have been 120 homicides in D.C. so far this year. That's according to D.C. police. Can the federal government afford to pursue that many death penalty cases every year?
So there's a number of issues. One, that is a very critical point of the death penalty is extraordinarily costly. People sentenced to death rightfully have the most amount of ability to have their cases reviewed, have their cases appealed. That's why there have been more than 200 people sentenced to death in this country that have later been exonerated, showing that they were not the killers. And so it would be extremely costly, financially costly. But second is all of the research into the death penalty shows it is not a deterrent. And so it's also not effective in terms of trying to stop murder. As a punishment, many people find that life in prison for those who have been rightfully convicted of prison, of a murder, is a rightful sentence. But the cost of trying to put hundreds and hundreds of people to death or 100 people to death every year, not only would it have the problem that the death penalty in America has of being wrong far too often, having too many racial disparities, and the government, particularly the federal government, is no moral authority to put people to death.
That's a good point. But while D.C. residents have rejected it, there is some acknowledgement that families who have lost loved ones to violent crime may be in favor of the death penalty. Do you think there is support or leverage here with the president's agenda to push this forward?
And this is where we just have to be honest. I have to be honest. If someone deliberately killed one of my loved ones, I don't doubt that my feeling would be I would want them to die. I have to be honest about that, right? Now, when we look at how the death penalty has been administered in this country, we see that there are nearly 200 people who are wrongfully sentenced to death. We see the gross racial disparities and inequality in the sentencing. We see that it's actually not a deterrent. And then the method of death in several states around the country recently has been torture. And so there's just so many reasons why it does not make sense to implement this in so many states around the country who have implemented moratoriums or who've outright banned the death penalty because of all of these problems. And that doesn't say there's individual families who don't want the type of punishment that the death penalty brings. That I actually understand that. I don't want to say I don't understand that point. I would understand that personally, but we have to look at how flawed the administration of the death penalty has become.
Important insight into this very divisive issue. David Mohammed, the executive director of the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.